I want to explain why net worth often begins to feel like it explodes after the first $100,000. But before I explain the strategy, I want to show you the mechanism. Because if you do not understand the mechanism, you will think wealth is magic. You will think rich people stay rich because they are simply lucky or because the game is rigged in some mysterious way. The truth is more mechanical. Money makes money, and when the base of money becomes large enough, the money it produces begins to matter more than the work you did to create the original base that is compounding. And compounding is one of the most powerful forces in finance because it starts slowly, then suddenly looks like acceleration. Most people quit during the slow part. That is why most people never reach the explosive part. Let me begin with a simple example. Suppose I gave you two choices. Choice 1, I give you $1 million today. Choice 2, I give you 1 penny today, and every day for 30 days, that penny doubles. Most people emotionally choose the $1 million because $1 million is visible. It is clear, it is large, it feels safe. A penny feels ridiculous. But the penny is the better choice. On day 1, you have 1 cent. On day 2, you have 2 cents. On day 3, 4 cents. On day 4, 8 cents. By day 10, you still have only about $5. At that point, the $1 million looks obviously better. The penny strategy looks foolish. Your friends might laugh at you. You might feel as if you made a mistake. But that is the nature of compounding. In the beginning, it looks like nothing is happening. Then something begins to happen. Then, very late in the process, the numbers become almost unbelievable. By day 21, you have over $1,000. By day 28, you have more than $1 million. By day 30, you end with more than $5 million. That is the lesson. The greatest part of compounding happens after the base has already become meaningful. The early days look boring. The later days look explosive. Most people want the later days without respecting the early days. That is the mistake. Getting your net worth to $100,000 is like getting to around day 20 in that penny example. It is not yet the grand result. It is not the end. It may not make you feel rich. It may not let you retire. It may not even change your lifestyle very much. But it changes the slope of the curve before $100,000. Most of the work is done by your labor. After $100,000, your capital begins to work more visibly beside you. That is the transition. The first phase of wealth is labor turning into savings. The second phase is savings turning into capital. The third phase is capital producing more capital. Most people never get past phase 1 because they cannot keep enough money long enough for the machine to begin helping them. That is why the first $100,000 matters so much. Not because $100,000 is a magic number. It is not magic. It is a threshold where compounding begins to become visible enough to change your behavior, your motivation, and your financial trajectory. Now let us put numbers on it. Suppose you can save and invest $10,000 each year. Suppose you earn a 10% annual return. We will use round numbers because the point is not perfect precision. The point is understanding the curve. In the first year, you save $10,000 and invest it. At the end of that first year, you have $10,000. In the second year, that original $10,000 grows and you add another $10,000. Now you end with around $21,000. In the third year, you have more money working for you and you add another $10,000. The balance rises again year after year. Two things are happening. You are adding money from your work and the money already invested is adding money from itself. At first, your contributions dominate. That is why the early journey feels slow. If you end up with your first $100,000 after about 8 years in this example, most of that money came from your own savings. Roughly $72,000 came from the money you worked for and saved. The rest came from investment growth. That is hard. That is why the first $100,000 is the hardest $100,000. It is not mostly created by investment returns yet. It is mostly created by discipline you are working. Saving, sacrificing, avoiding waste, investing consistently, and forcing the base into existence. That is why people quit. They think, I am saving and investing. But nothing exciting is happening. But they are not seeing what they are actually building. They are building the base that will later make the process accelerate. In the same example, getting from $0 to $100,000 takes about 8 years. The next $100,000 takes about 4 years. The next one after that takes about 3 years. Then later, the system becomes much faster. Eventually, your net worth can increase by $100,000 in a single year. Then later, it can increase by $100,000 in less than a year. The same person, the same savings discipline, the same return assumption, but a larger base. When you have $10,000 invested, a 10% return gives you $1,000. That is helpful, but it does not change your life. When you have $100,000 invested, a 10% return gives you $10,000. Now your money has created the same amount that you may have been saving manually each year, When you have $1 million invested, a 10% return gives you $100,000 at that point. Capital is producing what many people earn from work. That is why the rich stay rich. It is not only because they earn more, it is because their capital is large enough to create serious income and serious growth without requiring the same amount of labor. This is the unfair advantage of capital. It is not emotional, it is mathematical. If one person has $10,000 invested and another has $1 million invested, the same return produces completely different results. 10% on 10,000 is 1,000, 10% on 1 million is 100,000. Same return, different base. That is the entire game. So the most important thing for a person below $100,000 in net worth is to get there as fast as they reasonably can, not recklessly, not by gambling, not by chasing hot stocks, not by using leverage they do not understand, but by building the base with urgency and discipline. Because the longer you delay reaching $100,000, the longer you delay the point where the machine begins to help you. This is why small leaks matter so much early when you are worth $10 million. Wasting $100 is not the same as wasting $100 when you are trying to build your first 10,000. The early dollars are the most valuable because they have the most time and they are building the base that allows compounding to begin. The first $100,000 is not only money, it is momentum, it is proof, it is a system, it is the point at which the curve begins to bend. But now we have to confront the real problem. How do you actually get $100,000? Most people will not magically produce $100,000 in 1 year. For most people, it will take years. That is normal. The question is not whether it is easy. The question is whether you are willing to treat the first $100,000 as an urgent mission. That is where behavior comes in. If your net worth is below $100,000, most of the first $100,000 will likely come from money you worked for, saved, and invested. That means you cannot avoid the basics. You must spend less than you make. You must live within your means. You must save aggressively. You must invest consistently. You must avoid high-interest debt. You must stop letting lifestyle consume every raise. You must treat money that passes through your hands as capital, not just as consumption fuel. This is not glamorous, but wealth is usually not built by glamour. It is built by repeated decisions that look boring while you are making them. You need to save every dollar you reasonably can in that first phase because every dollar has a high future value. A dollar saved early is not just a dollar. It is a dollar that can start compounding. It is a dollar that can become several dollars later. It is a dollar that helps you reach the base where future dollars become easier to earn. That is why careless spending early in life is more expensive than people realize. You do not only lose the money you spent, you lose the compounding that money could have produced. This is opportunity cost, and opportunity cost is invisible. No one sends you a bill for the wealth you failed to build. You simply arrive years later with less. That is why discipline matters most when the rewards look smallest. At the beginning, saving money does not feel exciting. You skip a purchase and your net worth barely changes. You cook at home and the number barely moves. You choose a used car, skip subscriptions, or avoid a vacation you cannot afford, and the account still looks small. That is the boring phase, but every one of those decisions is laying track later. The train moves faster. The problem is that many people want to feel wealthy before they become wealthy. They upgrade lifestyle too early. They buy the new car before the investment base is built. They increase housing costs before savings are automatic. They let small luxuries become permanent expenses. They spend raises as soon as income rises. Then they wonder why compounding never arrives. Compounding cannot work on money that was never kept. That is the first rule. You have to keep money before it can multiply. This is why the first phase requires sacrifice. The source uses the phrase short-term pain for long-term gain. That is correct, but I would phrase it in system terms. A person must accept temporary discomfort to build permanent optionality. You are not sacrificing for nothing. You are exchanging small pleasures today for a future where your money begins working beside you. That is a good trade if done intelligently. It does not mean you never enjoy life. A plan that makes life miserable will probably fail. But it does mean that until the first $100,000 is built, consumption should be examined with a very sharp eye. Does this purchase move me closer to the base or away from it? Does this recurring expense create value or simply drain me? Is this lifestyle upgrade permanent? Am I spending because I chose to or because I am trying to feel less behind? Those questions matter. Now, many people focus only on cutting expenses. Cutting expenses is important, but it has a limit. You can only cut so much. You need housing, you need food, you need transportation, you need insurance, you need utilities, you need basic life expenses in an inflationary environment. Many people already feel they are buying only essentials and still have little left at the end of the month, so if you focus only on cutting, you may miss half the equation. The equation is simple. Income minus expenses equals surplus. Surplus becomes savings. Savings invested becomes capital. Capital compounded becomes wealth. If expenses cannot be cut much further, the lever must become income. You must increase your income. That may mean improving skills, changing jobs, negotiating pay, starting a side income, building a small business, freelancing, taking certifications, learning sales, learning technology, moving to a higher paying field, using your time more productively. The point is not that everyone has the same opportunity. They do not. But if your income is too low to create surplus, then the central problem is not only budgeting, it is earning power. Many people avoid that truth because earning more is harder than cutting a subscription. It requires discomfort, learning, rejection, and risk. But for many households, income growth is the only path to meaningful savings. There are only so many expenses you can cut. There is no upper limit to skills value creation and earning power in the same way. So the first $100,000 requires two actions at the same time. Control spending, increase income. Most people do one and ignore the other. The frugal person may cut everything but never work to raise income. The high earner may make more but spend it all. Both can stay stuck. The person who wins combines them. They keep expenses controlled while increasing income. That creates a widening gap, and the gap is where wealth is born. Now, the next principle is to start investing early, even if the amount is small. This is important because many people wait. They say, "I will invest when I have more money." That sounds reasonable, but it is often a trap. If you wait until investing feels meaningful, you delay the learning process and you delay the compounding process. Early investing may feel slow and boring. That is normal. The first deposits do not move much. The first returns are small, but that is how the system begins. The sooner you begin, the sooner you move through the boring phase. If you wait 5 years to start because you feel the amount is too small, you have not avoided the boring phase, you have simply moved it into the future. The boring phase cannot be skipped, it must be passed through. That is why small early contributions matter. They establish identity, they establish the habit, they expose you to market movement, they teach you how you react when prices fall. They make finance real, they put the compounding machine in motion. Do it in a retirement account if possible, do it in a brokerage account if appropriate. Do it through a workplace plan, do it through a Roth IRA if you are eligible and it fits your situation. Do it through simple broad index funds or ETFs, but start. The exact first dollar will not make you rich. The act of starting begins the system that can make you rich over time. That is the key. Now, if I were trying to build my net worth to $100,000, I would use a two-pronged approach. The first prong would be investing in the stock market. The second prong would be saving for a home down payment if I were in a place where buying a home made sense for my life. Let us start with the stock market. I would look for every structural advantage available. If my employer offered a 401k, 403b, or similar retirement plan with a match, I would try to contribute enough to capture that match. An employer match is free money attached to behavior. If the employer gives you money because you contributed, that is one of the highest return opportunities available to ordinary workers. You should not leave it on the table if you can reasonably capture it. After that, I would consider tax-advantaged accounts. A Roth IRA can be especially powerful for people who qualify because the money goes in after tax, and qualified withdrawals can be tax-free later. That means the future compounding can be protected from taxation if the rules are followed. Traditional accounts may also make sense depending on income, tax bracket, and future expectations. The specific account depends on the person, but the principle is simple. Use the tax code intelligently. Taxes are one of the biggest drags on compounding. If the government gives you legal structures that allow money to grow with tax advantages, you should study them. I would keep the investing simple. Low-cost index funds, broad ETFs, mutual funds if they are low-cost and appropriate. I would not make the first $100,000 depend on stock-picking genius. Most people do not need to beat the market in order to build the base. They need to participate consistently. They need to avoid fees. They need to avoid panic selling. They need to avoid speculation. They need to avoid turning the first $100,000 mission into a casino. That is why index funds are useful. They let you own a broad group of productive companies without needing to know which one will be the winner next year. They reduce company-specific risk. They make automation easier. They lower costs. They help you focus on savings rate and time, which are the variables you can control. I would set contributions to happen automatically every paycheck, every month, whatever the schedule is. The money should move before emotion has a chance to interfere. Automation is powerful because humans are inconsistent. If you wait until the end of the month to invest whatever is left, often nothing is left. If you invest first and live on the remainder, the system changes. This is why paying yourself first works. It is not motivational language, it is behavioral engineering. Make the desired action the default. The second prong is saving for a down payment on a home. If buying a home fits your life, that condition matters. You should not buy a home just because people say real estate always goes up. You should not buy if you do not know where you want to live. You should not buy if your job or life requires flexibility. You should not buy if the mortgage, taxes, insurance, maintenance, and repairs will make you fragile. You should not buy just because renting feels emotionally inferior. A home can be a powerful wealth-building tool, but only if it fits your situation. If it does fit, a home gives you something stocks do not leverage. If you save $40,000 and buy a $400,000 home, you now control a $400,000 asset with a $40,000 down payment. If the home rises 10% in value, the asset goes from $400,000 to $440,000. That is a $40,000 increase in property value relative to the $40,000 down payment. That is large. Of course, this example is simplified. There are closing costs, there is PMI if you do not put down 20%, there are property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, potential price declines, selling costs, interest costs, and leverage can hurt you if prices fall. So I am not saying a home is risk-free, it is not. But leverage plus inflation can work in your favor if you buy intelligently, can afford the payment, and hold long enough. Inflation can raise the nominal value of hard assets like real estate over time. A fixed-rate mortgage can become easier to handle if your income rises while the payment stays fixed. That is why real estate has helped many households build wealth. But again, sequence and discipline matter. Do not stretch so far that one repair destroys you. Do not buy a house that prevents you from investing. Do not treat the home as guaranteed wealth buy when the numbers work. If you are saving for a down payment, the money should not be placed in volatile investments if the timeline is short. A down payment needed in 1, 2, or 3 years should not be exposed to a major market crash unless you are willing to delay the purchase. For down payment money, a high-yield savings account can make sense. If a reputable bank is paying 4 to 5% interest, that can preserve liquidity while earning some return. The goal of down payment money is not maximum growth. It is safety and availability. Keep it in a reputable financial institution. Do not chase strange, risky, high-yield products that you do not understand just because the rate is slightly higher. Return of capital matters more than return on capital when the money has a near-term purpose. That distinction matters. Investment money can tolerate volatility if the time horizon is long. Down payment money often cannot. So I would build both paths: automatic investment into the stock market for long-term compounding, separate savings for a home down payment if home ownership fits the plan. That gives you exposure to productive businesses and the possibility of owning a leveraged hard asset. It is a practical wealth-building structure. Now let us return to the emotional side of the first $100,000. There is a reason Charlie Munger said the first $100,000 is extremely hard. But you have to do it. He understood the threshold. He understood that once the base exists, the game changes. Before the base, you are pushing the boulder mostly with your own labor. After the base, the boulder has momentum. That does not mean you stop working. It means your money begins to help. This is why urgency matters. Every year you delay building the base is a year the compounding machine is not fully engaged. If you never reach the base, you never experience the acceleration. That is the harsh truth. There are many people who spend their whole lives earning money but never build capital. They work, receive income, spend it, borrow, repay, spend again, and repeat. Their labor produces consumption but not ownership. Ownership is the difference. If you own assets, the system can begin paying you. If you only consume, you must always return to labor to get more money. There is dignity in work, but wealth comes from converting part of your work into ownership. That is the transition the first $100,000 represents. It is the first serious proof that you have converted income into capital. Now I want to explain why $100,000 feels psychologically different. When you have $1,000 saved, a $100 problem feels large. When you have $10,000 saved, a $1,000 problem still matters, but may not destroy you. When you have $100,000 in net worth, you have proof that the system is working. You can see that investment gains are now meaningful. A 10% return can be $10,000. A dividend yield can produce real annual cash. A market movement becomes visible. Your financial identity begins changing. You stop thinking only like a worker, you begin thinking like an owner. That identity shift is powerful. It changes your decisions. You become more protective of capital. You become less impressed by wasteful spending. You understand that every dollar invested can recruit more dollars. You begin to see money as a system, not as a pile of currency. That is the point. Net worth growth is not only about arithmetic, it is about becoming the kind of person who can handle capital. Many people cannot keep money because their identity is still tied to spending, status, or immediate comfort. The first $100,000 trains you to be different. It trains patience, it trains discipline, it trains delayed gratification, it trains consistency, it trains the ability to ignore noise. That training is valuable. If someone gave you $1 million before you built the habits needed to manage it, you might lose it. Sudden money without discipline often disappears. But if you build your first $100,000 yourself, you become the kind of person who can build the next 100,000 faster. That is why the process matters as much as the number. Now, what should you avoid during the first $100,000 journey? Avoid high-interest debt. Credit card debt is negative compounding. If your credit card charges 20% and your investment might earn 10% over time, the credit card is working against you faster than the market is likely working for you. Paying off high-interest debt is often one of the best guaranteed returns available. Avoid lifestyle inflation. The raise that could have accelerated your first $100,000 often disappears into a better apartment, newer car, food delivery, travel subscriptions, and status purchases. Then the person says their income rose, but they still cannot save. That is how the trap works. Avoid speculative shortcuts. Options, meme stocks, crypto leverage, and hot stock tips can look tempting because the first $100,000 feels slow. But the desire to skip the boring phase can destroy the base before it forms. Avoid comparing yourself constantly. Someone else may be ahead. Someone else may have inherited money. Someone else may have a higher income. Someone else may be lying. Someone else may be financing their lifestyle with debt. Comparison creates emotional decisions. Your job is to build your system. Avoid waiting for the perfect time. There is always a reason not to invest. The market is high, the market is low, inflation is high, rates are uncertain, politics is noisy, the economy is slowing, the economy is overheating. If you wait for perfect conditions, you will never start. Investing consistently through uncertainty is the discipline. Avoid keeping everything in cash forever. Cash is necessary for emergencies and short-term goals, but cash alone rarely builds wealth after inflation. If your long-term money is never invested, it does not get the chance to compound. Now, what should you do? Build an emergency fund so you are not forced to sell investments or use credit cards when life happens. Contribute to employer retirement plans enough to get the match if available. Use tax-advantaged accounts when appropriate. Invest in simple, low-cost diversified funds. Save for a down payment separately if home ownership makes sense. Keep down payment money safe and liquid. Increase income deliberately. Control lifestyle inflation. Automate the process. Review progress monthly or quarterly, but do not obsess over daily market movement. Those steps sound ordinary. That is because wealth often comes from ordinary steps executed with extraordinary consistency. Most people do not fail because they do not know the concepts. They fail because they do not execute long enough. That is the hard part. Everyone knows they should spend less than they make. Everyone knows they should invest. Everyone knows credit card debt is bad. Everyone knows higher income helps. But knowing is not doing. The first $100,000 is the test of whether you can turn knowledge into behavior. That is why it matters. Now, let us think about the time horizon. If you save $10,000 per year, that is about $833 per month. For many people, that is hard. For some, it is impossible without income growth. For others, it is possible but requires choices. If you cannot save $10,000 per year now, save what you can and build toward it. The point is not to feel shame. The point is to know the math. If you save $5,000 per year, the timeline is longer. If you save $20,000 per year, the timeline is shorter. If your investment return is lower, the timeline is longer. If your return is higher, the timeline is shorter. If you start earlier, the timeline is easier. If you wait, the required savings rate rises. This is cause and effect. Once you know the levers, you can move them. The levers are savings rate, income, expenses, return, time, tax efficiency, and consistency. Some are under your control more than others. You cannot control market returns. You can control contributions. You cannot control inflation. You can control some expenses. You cannot control every job market condition. You can control skill development and how aggressively you seek higher income, focus on controllable levers. That is how you keep the plan grounded. Now, I want to talk about buying a home as part of the path to $100,000. A primary residence can help build net worth because each payment may reduce debt and the asset may appreciate over time. But buying a home is not automatically wealth creation. If you overpay, stretch your budget, ignore maintenance, buy in a weak market, or move too quickly, the home can become a burden. So the home down payment path should be taken carefully. You should understand the full monthly cost, mortgage, principal and interest, property taxes, insurance, PMI if applicable, maintenance, repairs, utilities, HOA fees, closing costs, potential selling costs. A home can be a powerful tool, but only if the total cost fits within a system that still allows you to save and invest. If the house payment consumes all surplus, you may be house poor. House poor is not wealth. It is illiquid stress with a roof. A smart home purchase should improve long-term stability without eliminating financial flexibility. That is the balance. The advantage of the home is leverage and inflation exposure. The danger is illiquidity and concentrated risk. That is why I would not ignore stocks while saving for a home. You need both a long-term compounding engine and a near-term housing fund if home ownership is part of the plan. This is why the two-pronged approach makes sense. One track for long-term investing, one track for the home down payment. Do not mix the purposes. Now, there is another point from the source worth emphasizing. Wealth acceleration is not only about becoming rich for yourself, it changes what options you have. A person with no assets has fewer choices. They may stay in jobs they dislike because they cannot absorb transition risk. They may accept bad terms because they need money. Now they may avoid investing in skills because every dollar feels too precious. They may stay in a city relationship or situation because they lack financial margin. Capital creates options. The first $100,000 is often the first real option base. It creates confidence, it creates emergency protection, it creates investment income, it creates the possibility of a home purchase, it creates the ability to take calculated risks, it changes how you negotiate. That is why the target matters beyond the number. It is not about bragging, it is about reducing fragility. Fragile people need everything to go right. Resilient people can handle things going wrong. The first $100,000 moves you toward resilience. Now there is a danger once someone reaches $100,000. They may think the work is over. It is not. The first $100,000 is the beginning of the acceleration phase, not the finish line. If you reach it and then inflate your lifestyle aggressively, you slow the machine again. If you reach it and stop investing, the machine weakens. If you reach it and take reckless risks because you feel confident, you can lose the base. The correct response to reaching $100,000 is not celebration followed by waste. It is respect. You built the base. Now protect it and let it compound. That does not mean you never enjoy progress. It means you do not destroy the system that created it. The system must continue, save, invest, increase income, avoid bad debt, keep lifestyle growth slower than income growth. Diversify, build home equity if appropriate, keep learning. That is how the next 100,000 arrives faster. And once the next one arrives, the next one comes faster still. This is what people mean when they say money makes money, but it only makes money if you keep it in the system. If you constantly remove it for consumption, the system cannot compound. Now let us be honest about inflation. Inflation makes this harder in one sense and more urgent in another. It makes it harder because essentials cost more. Rent, food, insurance, transportation, and utilities may consume more income. That makes saving difficult for many households. But inflation also makes building assets more urgent. If dollars lose purchasing power over time, sitting still is not neutral. Cash that earns less than inflation is shrinking in real terms. Wages that rise slower than prices are falling in real terms. The cost of waiting becomes larger. That does not mean you invest recklessly. It means you must build a plan to own assets. Stocks are ownership in businesses. A home is ownership in a real asset. Index funds are diversified ownership. Retirement accounts are tax advantage containers for ownership. High-yield savings accounts are tools for short-term protection. Each has a role. The person who never owns assets remains exposed to inflation in a different way. They earn dollars, spend dollars, and hold dollars. But they do not own enough of the things that can rise with inflation over time. That is why the first $100,000 should not simply sit idle. Some of it should be invested for long-term growth. Some of it may be saved for goals. Some of it may be emergency reserves. The allocation depends on the person, but the principle is that net worth should be structured, not random. Now, what if someone starts late? The logic still applies. If you are 30, start now. If you are 40, start now. If you are 50, start now. The earlier you start, the more time you have, but the best remaining time is always today. Do not waste energy regretting the past. Regret does not compound. Action does. A person who starts late may need to save more, invest more consistently, reduce expenses more aggressively, increase income faster, or adjust goals. But action still changes the outcome. The worst response is to say, "I am too late," and do nothing. That guarantees the bad outcome. A better response is to say, "I am late, so the plan must be more disciplined." That creates a chance. Now, let us simplify the full strategy. First, calculate your current net worth, assets minus liabilities, bank accounts, investments, retirement accounts, home equity if you own property, vehicles if you want to include them conservatively, minus credit cards, student loans, car loans, personal loans, mortgage debt. Do not guess, calculate. Second, set the $100,000 target as a serious milestone, not as a fantasy, as a project. Third, create surplus. Cut waste where possible. Increase income where possible. Fourth, direct surplus automatically into the plan, retirement accounts, brokerage accounts, home down payment savings, emergency fund. Fifth, keep investment choices simple, broad index funds, low-cost ETFs, employer match, Roth IRA if appropriate. Tax advantage structures. 6, save down payment money safely if buying a home makes sense. 7th, review progress, but do not obsess. You are building a long-term machine. The machine needs consistent fuel, not daily emotional interference. Now, the final lesson is this. The first $100,000 is hard because you are doing most of the pushing. The second is easier because the machine is helping. The third is easier because the machine is bigger. Eventually, the machine can produce sums that once seemed impossible. This is why the beginning matters so much. The beginning is where discipline is forged. The beginning is where most people give up. The beginning is where sacrifice feels unrewarded. The beginning is where compounding looks too small to matter. But the beginning is also where the future is decided. If you can push through the slow phase, you can reach the point where the curve changes. That is why you should not underestimate the first $100,000. It is not just money. It is the moment your financial life begins to move from linear to exponential. Linear wealth is when you save only what you earn. Exponential wealth is when your money begins to earn beside you. The first $100,000 is the bridge between the two. Get there as quickly as you can, but do it intelligently. Save, invest, raise income. Use tax advantages. Keep costs low. Avoid bad debt, build toward assets. Do not gamble. Do not quit in the boring phase. Trust the math. Trust the process. And understand that the explosion comes after the grind, not before it. That is how wealth is built.